Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and we are into week, whatever you want to call it, of the coronavirus crisis. A few thoughts. First of all, as I look around the world, such a radical difference with where you have strong, unified response and where you do not. I mean, for example, in Japan, where you didn't have much in terms of official regulation, closing down restaurants or workplaces or the rest. But what they did do, everyone listened to, and there's extraordinary amount of support for government initiatives. So if they say wear a mask, everyone wears a mask. If they say engage in social distancing at your workplace or on the streets, everyone engages in social distancing. A lot of that in South Korea, too, and that certainly makes a difference in terms of ability to have response function. Now, in a country like the United States or in Italy, where there's much more individualism, irrespective of how much you like your government, just the ability to get people to pay attention to orders makes it a lot harder to respond effectively. And in Italy, where you see these mayors begging, pleading, and shouting obscenities at their citizens because they're just not listening. And yeah, governments in Italy is weaker than it is in a lot of other countries, though frankly, Northern Italy is pretty good. But the Italian sense of I'm going to do what I want and the authority doesn't really matter, and by the way, a lot of that in France, too, has definitely made it harder and has expanded the caseload. In Germany, you see a strong amount of support for what the German government has done, probably in Western countries, one of the best response functions we've seen. And as a consequence, it's made it easier. So social functions and interaction with government, which you wouldn't think necessarily matter so much in such a dire circumstance, actually ends up being one of the more significant variables out there. Clearly, another one is the ability to have healthcare effectively respond. And you've seen now this massive tension play out over the last couple days in the United States of just how long an economy can tolerate being fully shut down. And it is truly fully shut down. It's supply side and demand side. Before the politics to start opening up that economy and potentially risking big new outbreaks grows significantly. A couple of things I would say around this. The first is one of the reasons that you need consistent shutdowns early is in areas where the healthcare system is likely to be overwhelmed. Because if you cannot get access for people that need to be in intensive care, then you find that the fatality rates around coronavirus go up 5 to 10 times. Not to mention the fact that there are knock-on implications of your healthcare system no longer functioning. You get more cross-infection, you get more people that have other chronic and severe conditions that aren't able to be to get access to medical care, and crisis situations that are unrelated to coronavirus that are unable to get care. That has knock-on effects on the economy too. So it makes an awful lot of sense that no matter what you think about impacting the economy, at least until you can surge on number of tests and ability to test, which means distribution across all areas that have major outbreaks and the kind of things you need to get tests done. Now, in South Korea, they have a lot of infrastructure that they were building that allowed them to minimize things like the hospital gowns and the masks and the gloves that they needed to engage in tests. Didn't have to burn through as many. In the United States and Europe, that's not the case. So you need to surge on all of those things before you can talk about when you can open up the economy again. Now, the good news here is that this is now a top priority. No matter what government you're looking at in the developed world, surging on all of the test capabilities and the masks and the ventilators and all of the healthcare stuff, that is moving really fast. And we see companies in the US like Roche, for example, making hundreds of thousands of test kits now a week, a number of other companies making them as well. That will get us to a place that medical systems will be in a position not to be overwhelmed further, probably within a month in almost all localities. Now, there's a danger that some systems hit getting overwhelmed before then, and certainly that is a possibility in New York and some other municipalities in the U.S. in the next 2 to 4 weeks. That's probably the biggest danger zone for the U.S. Other parts of Europe, Spain, certainly going to be in that position in the nearer term, possibly Paris as well. Then you have emerging markets. And in emerging markets, you've got much bigger problems. Number one, really bad and late governance. In Mexico, in Brazil, government leaders that still right now refuse to accept the reality of this crisis, that are providing fake news to their people. I'm not talking about Trump exaggerating about when a cure might come, or suggesting in a tweet that there is that medicines could help to respond, that lead to a run on those medicines. Those are bad things, but still, even with Trump's daily now press conferences, which have replaced the rallies that he used to have all the time, you're getting real news from Mike Pence, real news from the Surgeon General, real news from the Director of the National Institutes of Health, Tony Fauci, others. So I do think that in the United States, at least around this crisis, the general information set that most people are getting, it's not great, but it's not god-awful. Where in Mexico, in Brazil, in a number of other emerging markets around the world, literally people are getting fake news, that it's not really a danger, it's not really a crisis, you can't get it, don't worry, act normally, go to your workplace. That is a disaster for some of the countries that can least afford to have a failed response mechanism. It also means that the lack of coordination globally makes it harder to get a handle on this crisis. Now, if you can shut down borders effectively, doesn't matter as much. Countries have border controls in a way that parts within countries don't. But still, this means that the economic hit is going to be much greater. So you're restarting supply chain right now in China, for example. In Malaysia, supply chain is now shut down for a minimum of 2 weeks. Everyone knows it's going to be longer. You know what? Malaysia has a lot of components of electronic goods, for example, as well. Supply chain across Asia, it's not all getting shut at the same time. It's rolling hits. Same is true in Latin America. Same is true in other countries. You don't have a global response, nor do you have an equal global rollout of this crisis, and that means the economic hit is going to be longer. Also, when you restart the economy, it takes time. I was talking to Danny Meyer, who we'll have on my show, GZERO World, this week, and he's saying that it's going to take him after the all clear, and he can start opening restaurants. It'll take him a month before his restaurants get fully open. Why is that? Because a lot of the people that he had to lay off won't be immediately available. Some will have other jobs. Needs to hire them, get them in place, integrate them. Maybe a couple restaurants to begin with, but then, it's going to take a month before he's at full functioning. That's obviously the case with so many different components of our interconnected economy. And between supply chain and labor disruptions and the rest, not to mention people that are ill, all of this is going to make it a lot harder to get the economy going. So, clearly second quarter is a disaster. It's the worst quarter that any of us will have experienced in our lifetimes. Third quarter, I do not expect will be anywhere as bad economically, but it will be bad. And that does imply that we're in a very heavy recession right now. The real question is when you reopen economies, if you get a further outbreak, further series of outbreaks, the potential for that to force you to take a second round of economic closures is significant. And that would be the absolute worst economic and market outcome for this crisis. So despite all of the political pressure to get the markets open and get the economy open again, you really have to be careful that you're not putting yourself in a position. You are going to have more cases and more deaths when you suddenly open things up. But you have to be able to tolerate it, because if you have to start shutting down the economy again and reestablishing quarantine, the level of confidence will be completely shot. You're going to open up this economy, and people aren't suddenly going to walk outside and feel comfortable engaging restaurants, consuming malls, and otherwise engaging the way they have. This is a supply and a demand shock, and those people, many of whom have lost their jobs, it's going to take them a long time to get back up to speed, even with strong stimulus. That final piece of this, I fully expect, is going to be done in very short order. If not right before this video drops, I'm shooting it very early in the morning, then, with certainly this week, and we're talking about a minimum, I would say, of $2 trillion headline in the United States. Could well be bigger than that. Then Congress goes away. A lot of them already have tested positive for coronavirus or are under self-quarantine. None of them want to be there. Getting them back together to negotiate a new bill is probably also a minimum of 4 weeks away. So if we get major market crashes in the interim, don't look to Congress for that help. That is actually an issue. Anyway, those are a few thoughts for me today. I'm sure I will be back with you either later this week or next week. Everyone be healthy and avoid people.